I confronted my husband's affair partner, and the truth that came out shattered everything I thought I knew, forcing me to make the hardest decision of my life. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Here, I share stories inspired by thought-provoking topics from Reddit, revolving around family, friendships, and life. Today, we're diving into a story where the main character faces a life-changing challenge. Have you ever been in a situation where everything you knew was turned upside down? Can you relate to the emotions of betrayal, heartache, and rebuilding from scratch? Stick around to the end to see how the character overcomes these struggles and finds strength again. And I'd love your support to reach 1,000 subscribers, as it would motivate me to continue bringing more inspiring stories to you. Thank you for being here. It was a warm autumn evening when I first met Ethan Blackwell. We were both at a mutual friend's party, surrounded by people trying to act cooler than they really were. With drinks in hand and that awkward, forced laughter that comes with social events you're not entirely thrilled about. Ethan stood across the room, not a man of many words, but his eyes. They were intense, a color I could never quite define, but they had a certain warmth to them. We locked eyes briefly, and in that instant, I felt something shift. Little did I know that one glance would turn my world upside down. We quickly became inseparable. Our shared love for adventure, traveling, and taking on the unknown pulled us closer. Ethan was the calm in the storm, the perfect balance to my more restless nature. By the time we reached our late 20s, we were living together, our lives a chaotic harmony of working 9-to-5 jobs, trying to keep up with our ambitions, and still making room for spontaneous weekend trips. We were happy, or so I thought, but, like the inevitable turning of seasons, things began to change. Ethan wasn't the same. The playful, loving partner I had known seemed to retreat into himself. He became distant, withdrawn. At first, I told myself it was just stress from work, the usual stuff. But as months passed, his moods became more erratic. He would come home late, eyes glassy, distracted, as if there was someone, or something, else occupying his mind. One evening, after another distant, cold dinner, I couldn't take it anymore. I found myself alone with his phone, my fingers hesitating as they hovered over the screen. The moment I opened his messages, my stomach sank. The words were clear. Ethan had been seeing someone. A wave of nausea hit me hard. Was I not enough? I could barely breathe as I stared at the name flashing across the screen. Sarah Blake. She was just a name, but in that moment, she felt like an entire universe. The worst part? She wasn't even a stranger to me. Ethan had spoken about her before, a colleague, a friend from work. My heart ached in my chest as the truth settled in. The man I thought I knew, the one I had shared my life with, was now a stranger to me. The night was the longest I had ever experienced. As I lay in bed, unable to close my eyes, I replayed every single moment over the past few weeks. The subtle changes in his behavior, the way he'd smile at me like everything was fine, but his eyes always seemed distant, as if he was somewhere else with someone else. Every word that Ethan had said suddenly felt like it was coded in deception. His jokes, the late nights, the sudden need for space. I had been so blind. How had I missed the signs? How had I ignored the feeling in my gut every time he left the house or when he'd spend hours on his phone? Acting like I didn't see the texts popping up. I rolled onto my side, clutching the pillow as if it could somehow give me comfort. My heart pounded with an intensity one couldn't explain. It was like I was suffocating in my own thoughts. The clock ticked mercilessly, and every minute seemed like an eternity. I needed answers, and I needed them now. By morning, I had resolved that I would confront him. No more hiding from the truth. No more pretending that things were okay when everything around me screamed that they weren't. The last few months of our marriage had been a blur, but in that blur, I had started to notice the cracks. But this was the moment that shattered everything. When Ethan came home from his usual early morning workout, he looked like his old self. He greeted me with that same casual smile, as if nothing had changed, as if everything was fine. But I could feel it, the tension in the air, thick like a storm cloud just waiting to break. I stood in the kitchen, my heart racing as I felt a surge of anger rise up in me. Without saying a word, I reached for his phone. The same phone that had been the source of my growing unease for weeks now. As I held it out to him, I could feel the weight of the moment. His eyes flicked to the phone, then back to me. The silence between us was suffocating, and the storm in my chest only grew stronger. "Is this her?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The words felt foreign, like I was speaking through a fog of disbelief. "Is this why you've been so distant? Why haven't you told me?" For a long moment he didn't move. His gaze shifted downward, and I watched his face soften. But there was something else there too, guilt, shame. The kind of look you give when you know you've done something unforgivable. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. I could see the struggle in his eyes. He was trying to find the right thing to say, but all I wanted was the truth. The raw, painful truth. "Olivia, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice trembling. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. It's been a mess. I wasn't thinking clearly. It's not about you, it's me." His words were empty. Empty because they didn't take away the sting. Empty because no apology could undo the betrayal that had already taken place. No amount of remorse could rewind the clock to a time before this. I could feel the rage bubbling inside me, a fire that I couldn't quite contain. My fingers gripped the edge of the phone so tightly I thought I might crush it. He had broken me, and he didn't even seem to realize the extent of the damage. This wasn't just an affair. It was the slow decay of everything I had trusted, everything I thought I knew about love. The lies were like a poison, seeping into every crevice of our life together. "Don't you dare make this about you," I said, my voice sharp and low, a tremor of anger threading through it. "You did this. You lied. You made the choice to be with her. Don't you dare turn this into something about your mistakes and your poor judgment. You knew exactly what you were doing." I felt a rush of emotion, grief, anger, betrayal, and I could feel tears start to form at the corners of my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. Not yet. Not until I had all the answers. Ethan opened his mouth again, trying to explain, but his words were lost. He stepped forward as if to touch me, but I took a step back, not wanting his touch, not wanting any part of him. The man I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. "I need space, Ethan. I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice quieter now, filled with the weight of finality. He looked at me, his face pleading, but I could see it in his eyes, the realization that it was too late. His desperate apologies, his promises to make it right, they meant nothing now. The trust that had once bound us so tightly was now broken beyond repair. I don't understand why this happened," he said, his voice a mix of frustration and sorrow. "We can work through this, Olivia. Please, I love you. Please don't leave me." But I was already walking away from the man who had once been my whole world, walking away from the illusion of our perfect life. There was no going back. Not this time. I moved to the bedroom, the place where we had shared so many intimate moments, and it felt like a stranger's room now. Nothing was the same. The bed where we had once laid together, dreaming of our future, was now an empty, hollow space. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands clenched in my lap, as I stared at the floor. The pain in my chest felt like it was suffocating me. I had loved him so much, and now all I had left was this aching void, this betrayal that I couldn't erase. I couldn't fix this. I couldn't fix him. I thought about everything that had led to this moment. Our love, our struggles, the dreams we had shared. And then, I thought about the woman who had come between us. Sarah, a woman I had never met, but who had taken the place of everything I had worked so hard to build with Ethan. He had betrayed me, and now I was left to pick up the pieces. But in that moment, I realized something. I didn't need him to be whole. I didn't need his words or his promises. I needed to find myself again. I needed to remember who I was before him, before the love, before the lies. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the world outside. The sky was gray, the clouds hanging low. felt like the world was mourning with me. But I knew, deep down, that I had to be strong. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something else, a life without him. And for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. I wasn't sure what came next, but I knew I couldn't stay in the past. I had to move on. For me, in the weeks that followed the confrontation, everything seemed like a haze, blurred, colorless, and full of echoes. I found myself going through the motions, barely feeling alive. I woke up each day, went through the routines that used to bring me comfort, but now felt completely foreign. My friends were there for me, of course. They offered their support, their advice, and plenty of "I told you so's." They were concerned, but I knew they didn't fully understand. None of them had felt the crushing weight of Ethan's betrayal the way I did. They couldn't know the quiet devastation that lingered in the silence of my apartment, the quiet that was only broken by my own thoughts, the kind of thoughts that kept me awake at night, replaying every moment, every interaction, every red flag I had missed. Ethan, for his part, was relentless. He begged for my forgiveness. He called me every day, each time with a new apology, a new plea for a second chance. "I made a mistake, Olivia," he would say. "Please, I love you. I don't want to lose you." His voice would tremble with sincerity, but I knew too well how sincerity could be twisted into manipulation. There were times when I thought about how easy it would be to fall back into his arms, to forgive him and pretend everything could go back to normal. But I couldn't. My heart, though still aching, had hardened. The trust that had once been so solid between us was shattered, and no amount of words could ever glue it back together. I packed my bags that day, slowly, almost methodically, as if performing a ritual I had no choice but to complete. I had lived with Ethan for years, but now, as I moved out, every object I packed felt like another piece of my past being erased. I loaded my things into the car, books, clothes, old photos, all the remnants of my life with him. I couldn't bring myself to throw them away, not yet. Even as I removed the things that reminded me of him, they lingered in my mind, each one another tether to the life I thought we would have together. I found an apartment on the edge of town, a small one-bedroom unit with white walls that seemed to close in on me. The emptiness of the apartment reflected the emptiness I felt inside. I couldn't bring myself to decorate it, to make it feel like a home. It was just a place to sleep, to exist. My new life began in a space that was void of memories, but full of the remnants of a past I was desperately trying to forget. Every inch of the place was quiet, too quiet. The silence became my constant companion, and in the silence, my mind replayed the same thoughts, over and over. The haunting image of Ethan and Sarah together would not leave me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. I saw the way his hands had touched her the same way he once touched me. I heard his laughter, the kind I hadn't heard in months, but now it was reserved for her. Every word he had ever whispered to me seemed meaningless now. All the love, all the affection, was it real? Or was it just a mask he wore for me, hiding his true feelings for someone else? I couldn't stop the images from flooding my mind. I couldn't stop the burning questions that gnawed at me. How long had it been going on? Was it something I had never been able to see? Did he really love me? Or was I just a placeholder until someone better came along? I tried to focus on work, on rebuilding myself. I threw myself into my job, hoping the distraction would make the pain go away. But every task felt like a hollow effort. It wasn't about the work, it was about not feeling, not thinking. But the pain was still there, lingering in the corners of my mind. One evening, as I was sorting through the last of my things, the ones I had kept but wasn't sure I should, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. My heart skipped a beat as I hesitated before answering. The voice on the other end was familiar, yet not someone I ever thought I'd hear from again. "Olivia?" came the shaky voice. I froze. It was Sarah. "I didn't know who else to turn to," she said, her voice quivering. "I'm sorry, Olivia. I never meant to hurt you." I blinked in disbelief. I wasn't sure what I expected, but it definitely wasn't this. The last thing I thought I'd hear was an apology from the woman who had taken my life and turned it upside down. But there it was, her voice, filled with regret. The conversation that followed was surreal. Sarah's words echoed in my mind as she continued to explain herself. She told me that she had no idea Ethan was married, that she didn't know he was committed to me in the way he had been. I could hear the guilt in her voice as she tried to justify her actions, but what struck me the most was the realization that she wasn't justifying them for herself. She was genuinely remorseful. "I never wanted to be the reason someone's marriage fell apart," she admitted, her voice full of vulnerability. "I didn't know, Olivia. I didn't know he was already in love with you. He never told me about you, about the depth of your relationship. I don't know what happened. I was stunned. I had imagined so many scenarios in my head about Sarah. I had imagined her as the enemy, the woman who had knowingly stolen my husband. But the reality was different. Sarah wasn't some heartless villain. She was just as much a victim in this twisted narrative as I was. She hadn't known the full extent of Ethan's commitment to me. She had been lied to just like I had. As much as I hated to admit it, a part of me felt sorry for her. She had been caught up in a web of lies, tangled by the same man who had broken my heart. But at the same time, I couldn't escape the fact that she had been the other woman. She had been with him in ways I never could have imagined. And I couldn't just let that go. I didn't know what to say to her. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her how much pain she had caused me. But something inside me held back. Instead, I found myself asking a question that had been tormenting me for weeks. "How long?" I whispered. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice barely audible. "A few months," she said. "But I never knew how deep it went with you. I never knew the truth." I hung up shortly after that, my mind spinning. I wasn't sure what to think. A part of me wanted to scream and lash out at her for being involved with Ethan at all. But another part of me understood that she hadn't known what she was walking into. She wasn't the real enemy, Ethan was. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring into the darkness, trying to make sense of everything. Ethan, Sarah, the affair. It all felt like one big tangled mess. My emotions were in turmoil. Part of me was angry at Sarah, but another part of me couldn't blame her. She was just as much a pawn in this sick game as I was. But no matter how much empathy I tried to feel for her, it didn't change the fact that Ethan had broken me. And now I had to find a way to rebuild my life, even if I didn't know where to start. Knock knock. Now you're about to watch the best part of the story. But before that, make sure to subscribe to my channel so we can keep going together. Months passed, but it felt like years. The days blended together, each one a quiet reminder of the life I had left behind. I hadn't heard from Ethan since that fateful phone call, and honestly, I wasn't sure if I wanted to. I had already learned that some relationships are just not meant to be, no matter how deeply you care for the person. Sometimes, love doesn't win. Sometimes, it's just a lesson in how much you're willing to forgive before you lose yourself. In the beginning, it felt like the world had stopped spinning. I couldn't remember what it was like to feel truly alive, to feel a sense of joy without the weight of betrayal dragging me down. But then, something inside me clicked. I needed to find myself again. I needed to learn what it meant to be me without Ethan, without the constant emotional toll, without the manipulation of my heart. I found peace in solitude. There's a certain beauty in being alone, a quiet power in being able to wake up every morning without the weight of someone else's expectations on your shoulders. My apartment, though small and simple, became a sanctuary. The walls, though bare and empty, were the backdrop for my self-recovery. No more distractions. No more pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I started rediscovering the things that made me happy before Ethan came into my life. I took long walks in the mornings, the sun warming my face as I sipped coffee from my favorite mug. I revisited hobbies I had forgotten, painting, reading, and writing. I joined a local book club and even signed up for pottery classes on a whim. I realized how much of my life I had sacrificed just to keep a relationship afloat, to keep a man in my life who didn't appreciate me for who I truly was. Now, I was learning to appreciate myself. Work became my refuge, but not in the way I had used it before. This time, I wasn't using work to escape my pain. I took on projects I had once pushed aside, tasks that required my full attention and creativity. It felt good to dive into something I could control, something that would show me my own capabilities again. The work wasn't just a way to fill the hours. It became a way to rebuild my identity, piece by piece. Slowly, I found myself smiling again, enjoying the small victories and the satisfaction of creating something that was all mine. I met new people along the way. The people in my book club became close friends, and their presence helped me feel like I wasn't completely alone. Their stories were different from mine, but the pain and the joys they shared with me somehow made me feel less isolated. For the first time in a long time, I realized that life could still be beautiful without Ethan. The world was still full of possibilities, even if it no longer included him. But it wasn't until a year later that I truly understood how far I had come. That was when I met Lucas. Lucas wasn't like anyone I had ever met. He was different, not just in his personality but in the way he made me feel. We met through mutual friends at an art gallery opening. He was a photographer, his camera slung across his chest, ready to capture moments of beauty in a world that often seemed too busy to appreciate them. There was something calming about him, something grounded. His smile was easy, his laughter genuine, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could just be. Our friendship began like many do, slowly, with small talks and shared interests. He would tell me about his travels to foreign lands, the places he'd visited to capture the perfect sunset or the most authentic moment of everyday life. I had always dreamed of traveling, but life had a way of pushing those dreams to the back burner. With Lucas, the idea of adventure felt real again. We started taking small trips together, hiking in nearby mountains, visiting new cities, exploring art museums, and getting lost in the beauty of the world around us. But as time passed, something shifted between us. The lines between friendship and something more blurred, though neither of us said anything about it at first. There were lingering glances that lasted a little longer than necessary. There were small touches, an accidental brush of the hand, a gentle hug after a long day. Each moment made my heart race in a way I hadn't felt in years. With Lucas, I didn't feel the pressure to be perfect. I didn't feel like I had to hide parts of myself or apologize for my scars. He accepted me, flaws and all, and that was a feeling I hadn't realized I had been craving for so long. With him, I could laugh without fear, talk without judgment, and dream without the weight of my past dragging me down. For the first time since Ethan, I allowed myself to love again. It was a slow process and I fought it at first. I didn't want to fall into the same trap I had before. I didn't want to give my heart to someone who might hurt me again. But Lucas wasn't Ethan. He didn't want to control me. He didn't need me to fix him. He just wanted to be with me, unconditionally. That was something I had never experienced in my relationship with Ethan. I realized that love wasn't supposed to be about sacrifice or manipulation. It was about growth, mutual respect, and care. One evening, after we returned from a photography trip, Lucas and I sat on the porch of the cabin we had rented for the weekend. The sky was painted with hues of purple and pink as the sun dipped behind the trees. We didn't say much at first. We simply sat there in comfortable silence, each lost in our own thoughts. Then Lucas turned to me, his eyes soft, yet filled with something deeper, something I hadn't expected. "Olivia," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know you've been through a lot, and I don't want to rush you or push you into anything, but I need you to know, care about you. I care about you more than I've cared about anyone in a long time." I felt a wave of warmth flood over me. The walls I had built around my heart, the walls that had kept me safe for so long, started to crack. I looked into his eyes and saw sincerity, something real, something I could trust. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to take a step forward. I didn't have all the answers, and I didn't know what the future would hold, but I knew that I was ready to experience love again. Not the kind of love I had with Ethan, full of promises broken and hearts shattered, but the kind of love that starts with trust, with respect, and with the belief that two people can grow together. With Lucas, I felt like I was finally starting a new chapter, a chapter where I wasn't defined by my past mistakes or the pain I had endured. I was defined by who I was becoming, and for the first time in years, I felt free. The past few years had been a whirlwind. The pain of betrayal, the anger, the sorrow. It had all been overwhelming at times, like a storm that left nothing but destruction in its wake. But now, sitting in the quiet of my apartment, reflecting on everything that had happened, I realized I was finally ready to let go. Let go of the anger. Let go of the resentment. Let go of Ethan. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one. I had forgiven him, not because I needed him back, not because I wanted to repair what was broken, but because I needed peace. I couldn't change what had happened. I couldn't turn back time and undo the hurt, but I could control how I responded to it. And in that moment, I chose peace. I chose to move forward, to stop letting the ghosts of my past haunt me. It had taken time, a lot of time, but the healing had begun. Slowly at first, like the sun creeping over the horizon after a long, dark night. There were days when I thought I would never get over the weight of the hurt. But here I was, at a place where I could finally take a deep breath and say, I'm okay. On the day I was set to finalize my divorce from Ethan, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. There were no tears, no dramatic last-minute pleas, just a quiet certainty that I was making the right choice. Ethan had moved on, and so had I. I didn't need his approval anymore. I didn't need validation from the man who had once been the center of my world. The woman I had become was strong, independent, unbroken. Sitting in that courtroom, signing the final papers, I realized something profound. The weight of it didn't hit me all at once, but as I stared at the signature line, it came to me. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't ending a relationship. It's realizing that the person you loved, the person you thought you knew better than anyone else, is no longer the person they used to be. And in that realization, you find a new version of yourself, one that is more resilient, more self-assured, and, for the first time in a long time, free. I didn't need to beg for answers anymore. I didn't need to try to make sense of the senseless. The lies, the betrayal, the manipulation, all of it no longer held the power to control me. Ethan had played his part in my story, but he no longer had a role in the future I was creating for myself. That chapter had ended. But as I signed my name on the dotted line, I wasn't just closing the book on Ethan and the relationship we once had. I was closing the door on the woman I used to be, the woman who allowed herself to be blinded by love, the woman who put someone else's happiness before her own, the woman who allowed herself to be defined by another person's actions. Now, I was writing a new story, one where I was the protagonist, not the supporting character. I was starting to see the pieces of myself that I had forgotten over the years. The vibrant, adventurous woman who used to chase after dreams, who had passions, who had goals that weren't tied to a partner. I was starting to feel like me again, and it felt good, felt liberating. But it wasn't just about closing the door on Ethan. It was about forgiving myself. I realized I had spent so much time blaming myself for what happened, thinking that if I had done something differently, things might have worked out. But now I understood. I did the best I could with the information I had. I loved him with everything I had. But love isn't always enough. And that was okay. I didn't need to carry the weight of regret anymore. The only thing I needed to focus on was moving forward. And that's what I was doing, one step at a time. As I left the courthouse that day, the finality of it all settled in. The divorce was official, but it didn't feel like an end, it felt like a beginning. A new chapter where I was free to be myself, to rediscover my passions, and to embrace a future that was entirely mine. And then there was Lucas. Lucas had come into my life slowly, at first as a friend. But as time passed, I realized he had become more than that. We had shared so much, our love for adventure, for travel, for photography. And through those shared moments, I began to feel something more, something real, something I hadn't felt in years. With Lucas by my side, I wasn't just healing, I was growing. I was learning that love wasn't something to be afraid of. It wasn't something that had to be complicated or painful. Love could be simple, it could be fun, and it could be fulfilling. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to love again. But this time, it was different. With Lucas, I didn't feel the need to fix anything. I didn't feel the pressure to be someone I wasn't. I didn't need to prove myself or seek approval. I was just me, and that was enough. The past few years had been hard. They had been painful, and they had tested me in ways I never imagined. But in the end, they had made me stronger. I was no longer the woman who was afraid of moving on. I was no longer the woman who needed someone else to make her feel whole. I was whole, and that was enough. So as I stood at the edge of my new beginning, I realized something profound. The hardest part wasn't moving on from Ethan. It was learning to move on from the person I had been, the person who had let fear dictate her choices. Now, with Lucas by my side, I knew that whatever came next, I would be ready. Because for the first time in years, I was living for me. What do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts, reflections, or feedback. Leave a comment below and let's talk about it. Your thoughts matter, and they help me grow and create better stories for all of you. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this journey with me. That way, you won't miss out on what's coming next. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen, and I can't wait to share more stories with you soon.